Today on Locked On Rockies, can the Rockies play 500 ball the rest of the way? And what is going on with Luis Montero? Plus, we take a look at the Pirates series.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 14th day of June in the year 2024. I was about to say 2022. How did I get to 2022? Classic Friday brain going on over here on the Locked On Rockies podcast, where you can find all your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. And if your team is the Colorado Rockies, you're in the right spot, because that's what we do around here each and every day is talk Rockies baseball free and streaming for you on your favorite streaming services and on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can be part of the show and even get your comment read and have it be a whole topic today, because we are going to read K Gold's comment and dive into it a little bit, as we got the response from Bud on his thoughts on Bud Black and hanging around that, and asks or brings up an interesting scenario for the Colorado Rockies. So we're going to dive into that and more on today's episode of Locked On Rockies. But folks, if you want to be involved with the show, if you want to help the show grow, if you want to play a part, liking, subscribing, commenting on the videos on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel is the best way to do so. If it's your first time catching the show, I'm Paul Holden. I'm your Rockies fan extraordinaire. Been following this team my entire life. Been bringing you Colorado Rockies talk daily for 4 seasons now here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Okay, so we're going to dive into this interesting scenario here in just a sec about the Rockies playing 500 ball. But before we do that, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. All right, so here's the question, or here's the scenario here from KGold53 on YouTube here. This was in response to yesterday's episode, which was titled, "How Confident Are Fans in Colorado Rockies Manager Bud Black?" KGold53 says, "Believe it or not, Black has righted the ship in the past 32 games. Since starting the season 8-28, Rocks have gone 16-16 over what amounts to 20% of the season. If they continue to play 500 the rest of the season, they finish at 71-91, which would be seen as major progress. Of course, playing 500 isn't too likely for this team over the next 94 games." And if you're curious, Sean Trey Wartha says, "I haven't watched the episode yet, but 0-0 confidence fired him yesterday." So interesting spot for Bud Black to be in right now. And I saw that comment from K Gold, and I agree. Are the Rockies likely to play 500 ball the rest of the way? No. Let's start there before we dive too deep into this rabbit hole. At its core, fundamentally, do I believe the Colorado Rockies can play 500 ball the rest of the time? That means the Rockies will then need to win 47 more times, right? That's how many games they need to win the rest of the season with the amount of games remaining. And like K Gold said there, you finish the season with 71 wins, which is a huge improvement, right? Especially when you think of where the season ended last year and the other trends. I don't think the Rockies have had 70 wins in a couple of seasons. Let me double check here. 2021. Okay, nope. They were 74-87 in 2021. And then back in 2019, I'm going to skip the pandemic season, 71-91. So the Rockies could match their 2019 win total if they do play 500 ball the rest of the way. And so, okay, let's take a look at the schedule. We talked a lot going into this season, and what we've seen this year is the Rockies' schedule this year was brutal, especially at the beginning of the year when you're looking at how many talented teams this Rockies team has played. What's been interesting to see how this is shaken out now is the Rockies have been playing well against the good teams and really bad against the bad teams. If the Rockies are going to finish above 500, or I'm sorry, if they're going to finish 500 and play 500 ball the way out, they got to start beating the bad teams. They got to start dominating the bad teams. They got to start letting or actually taking care of business like we're seeing in moments, and before throwing it all away. The A's series, prime example. You can't let Cincinnati come in and sweep you at home. These types of things can't happen if you're going to finish if you're going to finish this way, if you're going to finish to get to that 70 win mark there. All right, let's take a look at the actual schedule here Okay, so for the rest of the first half of the season, as defined by ESPN's first half here on their schedule thing, before the until July 14th here. These are the series that the Rockies play now against until July 14th to finish the first half of the season. Pittsburgh, Dodgers, Nationals, Astros, White Sox, Brewers, Royals, Cincinnati, and Mets. So on a quick look, you say possibly a win a this is a home series here. The Rockies have a huge homestand here against Pittsburgh, LA, and the Nationals. If you're confident and you're feeling good, the Rockies should be able to handle business against Pittsburgh and Washington at home. Two teams, though, I'm not abundantly confident the Rockies handling business against. I feel like Washington has played Colorado really, really well of late. And Pittsburgh, the Rockies and them often go back and forth. So when I look there, I think the Rockies can win 2 series in this upcoming homestand. I don't have them taking a series from LA, but it'll be interesting. Here's an interesting road trip, though. It's a real quick trip to Houston. 2 games in Houston, followed by a series in Chicago. Houston is rolling a little bit now. They are playing much better ball. They're still not quite where they need to be, but they keep piecing together wins. They've fought their way but now into 3rd place in the AL West, still 8 games behind Seattle, but now they're not going through long stretches of long losses here. A couple of back-to-back losses and a 3-game losing streak there when they played the Mariners, but in between, they're still peppering in some wins. And the Astros handled business against the Rockies pretty well, and it's in Houston. So, that's another mix there in terms of that wrinkle. So when I look at the second half schedule, I see 3 series that I'm confident. No, I see 2 series that I'm confident in the Rockies winning, but they're both road series. So we'll see how that pans out against Chicago and the Mets. But I am feeling pretty good that the Rockies, a 10-game homestand, you got to come out with a couple of series wins, especially if it's going to be Pittsburgh and Washington. Those 2 teams coming into Colorado, and those 2, the interesting thing is the Pittsburgh's not going to see Quantrill or Gomber in this. So that's going to be an interesting wrinkle for this Pittsburgh series. The Nationals will see Quantrill and Gomber. So that's going to be added into that. And here's another factor for tonight's game as well as we're looking at this. Ryan Feltner is starting. We know how much Ryan Feltner has struggled at Coors Field. Ryan Feltner then has to pitch again against the Dodgers in this homestand. So there's a couple of games you're worried about. So I'm not even confident in the Rockies being able to finish 500 in the rest of the month because the Rockies play the vast majority, the rest of the first half of the season, I should say. But all right, because the interesting thing, I think, if they do pull off this 500 stretch, it's these series when Milwaukee and Kansas City come into Coors Field. How do you handle with those type of teams, those good teams, but not like, alarm blaring, like, hey, here's great teams. I guess Milwaukee's been that way. They've been pretty much in control of the Central this entire season so far. And Kansas City has been very good this year. 10 games above 500, and the only 5 games actually behind Cleveland there as well. So those are 2 teams that are going to be really good that have kind of flown under the national radar a bit. If you want to finish 500, if you want to surprise folks, that homestand is going to be a really interesting one to kick off July. That first week of July, if the Rockies can play well against a good team, 2 good teams, you're sandwiched between that Chicago and Cincinnati, two series that you feel like you can win as well. If the Rockies are able to go on a little bit of a roll there to go in the end of June and start off July, that's a pretty good start because at least you're not super. I know the Reds swept the Rockies, but I'm not overly intimidated by them, and I'm not overly intimidated by the Mets. But again, it all in the middle of that is a really big homestand that's gonna make or break this 500 push. All right, that's the rest of the first half of the season. Let's take a quick look at the second half here at the opponents. And immediately off the rip here in the second half of the season, you see something you don't want to see. You see 2 series against the Giants there. So in the first, in the first 3 series of the second half of the season, the Rockies will play the Giants 7 times, and that's both one on the road, 1 series on the road, and 1 series at home. Mixed in between there, you got a Boston team that's doing all right. You got the Angels and San Diego as part of a really long California road trip that goes back to that San Francisco series. And then here, as we're going down the line, and I'm scrolling down here, I'm seeing, let's count how many series are actually going to be being played here in the second half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. There's 20 series to be played in the second half of the season. Out of those 20 series, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those series. 7 of those series are against the NL West. And that includes most of the time, a team you're playing in the second half of the season are the Dodgers and the Giants. You're starting the first half of the second half. You're starting the second half of the season up with 7 out of your first 10 games being against San Francisco, and you're finishing the second half of the season with 6 of your last 9 games being against the Dodgers. And even if you want to go a little bit further than that into the final 12 games, you have Diamondbacks, Dodgers, Cardinals, Dodgers. I think this path is too tough. I just think when you break it down and when you look at everything, I don't think the Rockies are going to be good enough to withstand the layout of the schedule. And then again, when you're looking here at who do the Rockies play in the second half? Other teams, they play the Red Sox, they play the Braves, they play Atlanta, they play Baltimore, they play Milwaukee, they play the Cubs at a time where the Cubs are going to be fighting for a playoff spot. Same with St. Louis. I just am not overly confident that this team, when you really look at the schedule and when you look at everybody, I don't know if this team is going to be able to pull off that 500 stretch along the way. The real difference maker will be how the Rockies handle home. How good are the Rockies going to finish this year at Coors Field? How much they can bounce back on the road, how they can handle the division, and what is that record going to be at the end of the year about the good teams and the bad teams. That's probably going to be a frustrating sticking point for the Rockies when this season ends, when they look at, man, we played well against great teams, but man, we couldn't get anything going against these bad teams. That's a really frustrating thing too. So thank you there for that comment, K Gold. Really appreciate it and diving into it. Went a little bit long there. So we got to take a break. We're going to talk Luis Montero coming up next on today's episode of Locked on Rockies. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes Tax Network USA. Folks, taxes are a bit much, right? They're stressful. You never know sometimes if you're doing the right things, or you thought you did all the right things. You went down, you crossed your T's, you dotted your I's, you did everything, yet you still need a little bit help. Well, guess what? Here on Locked on Rockies, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, the playoffs. It's year-round. And you know what else is year-round? Collections season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after your unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. Don't go it alone. Don't take on the IRS alone. Get the help you need. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion. That's $1 billion with a B dollars in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000. That's 1-800-549-1000, or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. tnusa.com/lockedon. You can see the link in the episode description below. This is the Locked on Rockies podcast. We are free and streaming on your favorite streaming services, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked on Podcast Network. Hey, speaking of the Locked on Podcast Network, if you are looking for your 24/7 streaming sports fix, got you covered with Locked on Sports Today. Free 24/7 streaming channel giving you insight into all things sports from all your favorite Locked on hosts. And of course, you can catch all your play-by-play action of the Colorado Rockies all season long on SiriusXM and the SiriusXM app. Just search Colorado Rockies, and you'll be taken to where you need to go. And one last plug for you: every day or after the games, check out the Locked On Sports, the Locked On Denver Sports channel, where our friend Anilo is breaking down all things Rockies after the game. We just had him on the show the other day as we recapped the Twins series. So hopefully those on this feed got a nice introduction. If you haven't, head over there. More great Rockies content. And let's dive into more great Rockies content right now as we head to the wonderful Purple Row. Yes, you all know how much I love Purple Row. You all know how much I love the work of Skylar Timmons and company over there. And there was a great piece from Purple Row on Wednesday called "The Curious Case of Eleris Montero," and I'm gonna skip around a little bit here, and I highly suggest you go read this, because Skylar goes deeper into some themes and stuff that we're not going to have enough time to dive into everything. So go read this piece, go learn a little bit more, because this is a really interesting storyline for the Rockies here going through the rest of the season. Not as we're talking about wins and losses the rest of the season, just looking at the schedule. Here's a guy that's hoping to be directly responsible for helping the Rockies hit that 500 along the stretch here. Okay, so this doesn't factor in Thursday's game. Remind me, this is from Wednesday. In 2013 plate appearance, I think this was before the day game on Wednesday, I believe. Yes, this was before the day game on Wednesday. In 213 plate appearances over 57 games this season, Montero is slashing a meager 206, 268, 294, which is the lowest slash among qualified Rockies hitters and places in the bottom 10 among qualified hitters in Major League Baseball, while his 562 OPS, his 253 WOBA, and 43 WRC plus rank the lowest. According to Fangraphs, Montero is worth negative 1.4 FWAR, making him the least valuable player among qualified players. So what's going on? Skylar continues to add here, near the end of the 2023 season and going into the regular season, there was much talk about Montero's efforts to make adjustments to his swing, mainly trying to keep his head from pulling away from the ball as he swung. As much as he is known for power, strikeouts were a major problem, especially at the big league level. Owning a career 34.8% strikeout rate coming into this 2024 season, Montero has shown incredible improvement in that area and currently owns a 21.9% K rate, a few ticks below the league average. The cut down in strikeouts has naturally led to an increase in his walks to an 8.1% rate, nearly double his career rate in the previous two seasons, as he has a career high 17 walks this season. Unfortunately for Montero, this better plate discipline hasn't yielded better results offensively compared to his previous two seasons. Available to most offensive metrics available via StatCast, Montero doesn't rank well in most categories, literally all of them. I mean, you can look at average exit velocity, hard hit percentage, and that increase in the K percentage and the walk percentage. But all the other stuff, the batting average, the deeper batting average, the slugging, the barrel percentage, the sweet spot, the chase percent, the whiff percent, all in the blue, all far too low for a power hitting slugger like Montero. He's the Skylar goes on and adds that the one of the best tools that Montero has is that high bat speed, which should translate to more power, but he's just not getting there. So he's not necessarily squaring up the ball, Skylar says, and the launch angle is a bit of a problem. And it all stems down to, and it all comes back to what Skylar gets to in this piece here, because I don't want to just read it word for word, is that this is the direct result of how the Rockies have handled Eleris Montero. This is the direct result of signing Chris Bryant. This is the direct result of all of that, because I don't personally think the Rockies have put Eleris Montero in the best position to succeed. I truly don't necessarily think that since the trade, Montero has ever really been truly given the best opportunity to work things out. This is finally a year where he's getting consistency in terms of his playing time, and that's only at the result of Chris Bryant now being on the IL. And Skylar points out in this piece as well, Michael Toglia playing well on his recent call up here. Here's some numbers to back that up here. Since his recall on June 6th, Toglia has thrown out 5 hits, including a triple and 18 at-bats, and played stellar defense in the outfield and at first base. In that same stretch, Montero has a double and a single in 16 at-bats with 6 strikeouts. The team also has to juggle the contractual disaster of Bryant at first base while shuffling players through the outfield and DH. The Rockies now are going to be pushing themselves into a situation when Kris Bryant returns and you have Michael Toglia. Does Montero even see the field? Is Montero going to be given the consistent playing time and the opportunities to right his wrong? And here's the deal. I think every player, and this goes the same for like a Brendan Rodgers situation too. If you truly want to see if the player can adjust and manage and handle and go through a full season, they need to play consistently and be confident that they are going to play consistently and be in the lineup every day. Montero now again has to go through a situation in which he doesn't know if he's going to be in the lineup every day. And yes, you need to perform in order to get into the lineup, but you even need to have a chance to crack the field. There's just so many problems here. And Skylar adds this. There are jams across the roster, and something has to give as more talent gets closer to cracking the big leagues. In parts of 3 seasons, is just batting 229, 278, 338 with 220 home runs and 82 RBI. Hold on. From what we've seen, there might not be enough evidence. Yeah, I don't know if that's. I think that's Kris Bryant. Yeah, I think that's the Kris Bryant. 220 home runs. Who's hitting on what? I don't know. I got a little lost in Skyler's right. But anyway, however, in his 194 career games at the big league level, that's the quote here I wanted to get to. However, is 194 career games at the big league level a sizable enough sample size to make this sort of judgment for Montero? As much as we like the personality or the person, sentimentality can't overrule the overall glaring needs of a team like the Rockies. At the end of the day, it feels like Montero is the manifestation of the failures of the current Rockies organization. They can identify talent, but often have an extremely difficult time helping them develop and succeed at the big league level because they often refuse to commit to those they don't deem their guys. Now Montero has the uncertainty of his future breathing down his neck, and he hasn't been able to rise to the occasion. I can't imagine that type of pressure, but the fact remains that the Rockies have to come to a conclusion about him and finally close this curious case for both sakes. That's a great way to end this. That is exactly summarizes the Montero experience right here. And the Rockies got to make a call. I don't know. 194 games that's a full season's worth of games, but it's not consistent enough, right? It's not. What I was getting into before I was finding that quote is he hasn't been given a season in which he knows that he is the everyday guy. He is confident that he is the everyday guy. He can build that up in his brain and in his mind that he is the guy. But instead, as the Rockies have done these things, and as they've brought in the Jake Caves and they've brought in these other veterans and the Kris Bryant situation, he is blocked everywhere he goes. He can't play the outfield. He's not an outfielder. He couldn't play third base. He wasn't good enough defensively there. He can't play first base because you got to play Kris Bryant there when he's actually healthy. And on the flip side, they have this other guy that's supposed to be the second coming of Todd Helton, as the way they've described him. The Rockies have not created a path to success for Elehuris Montero. They have not given him the reason. They have not built up enough around him. They haven't given him enough consistency. They haven't been able to help him unlock his true potential. The Rockies have failed in the development of Elehuris Montero. I think that is plain and simple. It's not working. Whatever the Rockies' approach and philosophy to handling Montero and getting him in the game and playing him and working with his craft is not working. And you know what looms for the rest of the season now? Michael Toglia, Hunter Goodman, Sean Bouchard, Jordan Beck. All these names are going to be back this season. Kris Bryant. All these names are going to be back and play a factor in the playing time for Montero the rest of the season. On the flip side of all of this, though, the pressure's on Montero. You need to step up too. You need to make an adjustment. You need to break out. That is on the player as well. There is definitely a little bit of a finger to point to Montero as well. But you can't sit there and ignore the fact that he hasn't made good improvements. The improvements on the chasing and the walks and the strikeouts, that's all massive progress for Montero. But what else? How can the Rockies help him take that next step? And can the Rockies help him take that next step? I don't necessarily know if they've proven that. All right, let's take a look at the Pirates series and get ready for the weekend coming up next right here on Locked On Rockies. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about some of the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes Game Time. Game Time, Game Time, Game Time. What can't I say about Game Time? Because I love Game Time. It's actually really the only way I buy tickets now. I don't like to go through most of the other ones. I like the Game Time deals. I like the Game Time process. I like the Game Time app, and it's all available to you with a great deal for with us here at Locked On. Game Time takes the stress of getting those last-minute tickets to your favorite baseball game. Maybe you're looking at, hey, home homestand coming up for the Roccos. I'm looking for a great deal. Game Time's got you covered. Not only are you going to get a great deal on all sorts of great seats, you're also going to be able to opt into the all-in pricing. So when you click the little button on there, you're going to be able to get a thing where it just says, here's your price, here's the fees, here's everything up front. You know exactly what you're paying for. And an added bonus, we'll put a picture of your seat too, so you know exactly where you're going to sit. So you know everything you're getting. You know where you're going to go. You know exactly what you're paying for. And you can do it 10 minutes before the game starts, maybe even a little bit after. Game Time is all about last-second deals and helping you get to your favorite events, especially baseball, all season long. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And you can see, like I said, seat views. Love that. The worst thing, you buy a ticket, and then you're like, what the heck is this? Where am I sitting? That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, folks, you can download the Game Time app and you use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Yes, that's $20 off your first purchase when you use the code LOCKEDONMLB. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKONMLB, and you will be getting $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast. We are indeed free and streaming on your favorite streaming services, and your Rockies play-by-play action is available on SiriusXM, in case you knew that. Shout-outs to our everydayers out there. Okay, rapid-fire series preview here as we are getting to the end of today's episode of Locked On Rockies. I do need to give a brief announcement after this, so before we get into that, let's dive into real quick the opening matchup between this. It doesn't sound like we're going to see Skeens. I think that they are going to skip the start. I have not seen that, but here's going to be the difference maker for the Rockies in this series. When you're looking at things, they are very similar offenses here between these two teams. The Rockies have a higher team batting average, a slightly higher team OBP, and a slightly higher team slugging. I think the big difference maker in this series is going to be the long ball. The Pirates have hit 61 home runs this season. This season. The Rockies are at 56. This is Coors Field. This is your environment. You have to dominate here, especially as you're looking to bounce back from that series loss that you had in Pittsburgh. The Rockies are going, has not announced who the starter for the Pirates will be tonight, but the big storyline of how to start this series off right is backing up Ryan Feltner at home. Having Ryan Feltner have a successful start at home. He needs one, and he needs the Rockies to help back him up. Elias Diaz is still not officially activated to the IL. I think that was supposed to be announced yesterday or something, but we'll keep an eye on that to see if that happens today. A factor there. Elias Diaz is the team's leading in batting average at 303 right now. So players, again, another guy I'd really like to see build off of, even though that last game in Minnesota was a bit of a stinker and everything got out of hand. Ryan McMahon was swinging the bat pretty well there in those last few at-bats, getting a couple of home runs and a couple of doing some damage there in the finale. So would love to see that translate and carry over there into this series. And the Pirates, they're in a situation where they can't really afford to keep losing. I mean, they can't afford to lose this series. I mean, all these wins are going to start mattering for them because the NL Central is an absolute logjam for second through fifth in their standings there. Milwaukee's sitting all right there with a 6.5 game over St. Louis, but both St. Louis, Cincinnati, and Chicago all have 33 wins. Pittsburgh right behind at 32. So, Pittsburgh's coming into this series hungry, especially because they just dropped a series to division rival, the St. Louis Cardinals coming up. So the Rockies got an opportunity to keep making things interesting in the Central and play make things a little bit harder for the Pirates. It's going to be a tough way to start because they gotta help Ryan Feltner figure out how to navigate Coors Field. Folks, that is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We really do appreciate that. For your second listen, go check out Locked On MLB, or if you need more Colorado sports coverage, Locked On Broncos, Locked On Avalanche, Locked On Nuggets, and Locked On Buffs got you covered. Folks, until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On I meant to say my announcement. I can't forget that. The show is probably going to look a little weird, maybe starting next week at some point. I'm actually totally transparency. I'm actually getting married, so I will be stepping away from the pod about midweek next week. Hopefully, going to do some crossovers for Thursday and Friday, ironing out the details. But we might be having Anilo hosting the last week of the month. Absolute worst case scenario, which I really hope doesn't happen. And I don't think it will happen. So please don't think this, but there might be a slight break in the last week of June if I can't get the coverage that I'm planning on getting. But just a heads up there as we're getting closer to that, as I head out of town, and then we'll be a little bit out of communication here as we're getting to the end of June. So I'll keep you updated. I will still be bringing you pods for sure Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday next week. Hopefully going to do some crossover action and get some stuff covered. So you'll be seeing me all next week. But the last week of June, put it on your radar. You'll either still see a fill-in host, see something else here on the show, or it just might be a week break. And I will be right back in action in July. I ain't going anywhere. I'll be back in July. I'll be back in action. But just putting that on your radar ahead of time here as we're getting closer and closer to that. Okay, now this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast. Have a wonderful weekend.